August 12th, 1997. A date that, for most people in that small inner-city town, was just another ordinary night, with nothing worthy of being remembered. But for Elena, it would be the mark of a transformation so profound that not even the years could erase it. The dirt road was almost deserted, surrounded by fields plunged into darkness. The wind blew with a cold melody, carrying the rustling of dry leaves, while the sound of the crickets seemed to sustain the silence that enveloped the place. It was a night with nothing special, or so it seemed. Elena walked quickly back home. In her hands was a bag with some groceries she had bought at the store before it closed. Her life was not made of surprises. Every step seemed to repeat the steps of the day before. However, on that night, something would escape any routine, breaking the common fabric of her existence. It was then that her eyes were drawn to something on the horizon. A light, small, intermittent, as if it were a broken flashlight, blinking desperately. She frowned, trying to understand. There were no cars in that direction, nor parties. No neighbor usually walked through the field at that hour. Elena's heart sped up, not from immediate fear, but from a strange curiosity that seemed to drag her in. The light trembled, almost going out, then rekindled. It seemed to be asking for help. It seemed to be inviting her. Elena stopped in the middle of the road. She felt the colder wind run across her arms. A natural instinct told her to go straight, ignore it. But there was another call, deeper, whispering, "Go, find out. There is something waiting for you." That night seemed ordinary, but it would turn into the night that would forever change Elena's life, and perhaps the future of humanity. Elena turned off the road and entered the field. The tall grass brushed against her legs, and the dark seemed to swallow her whole, except for the flash of that mysterious light. Every step was accompanied by a weight in her chest, a mixture of anxiety and fascination. Gradually, the light became clearer. It didn't come from a flashlight. It didn't come from any object she could recognize. It was something irregular, metallic, as if it were part of a damaged mechanism, oscillating between failures and brief flashes. Elena got closer. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the strange buzzing sound coming from that source. Then, in the midst of the shadow, she saw something that made her hold her breath. It wasn't human. Lying on the grass, with movements restrained by pain, was a being different from anything she had ever imagined. Its skin reflected the intermittent light in silvery tones, as if it had been born from the stars themselves. Its eyes, huge and dark, conveyed not threat but fragility. It was injured. Beside it, a broken device trembled in frustrated attempts to get back up. Elena felt the urge to run. Her whole body screamed with the instinct to flee. But there was something stronger. That being, even unknown, emanated a kind of silent appeal. It was not a monster. It was not an enemy. It was someone, or something, that needed her. For a few seconds their eyes met. A silence full of meaning hung in the air. At that moment, Elena understood, without a single word. Her life had just crossed an invisible portal. Nothing would ever be the same again. Thus began the story of an ordinary young woman and a being that did not belong to Earth. An improbable encounter, hidden under the cloak of night, about to become the spark of a connection that would challenge not only the limits of her forgotten small town, but also the limits of human understanding itself. Elena was, until then, a young woman like so many others trapped in the predictable cycle of a small inner-city town. She woke up early, helped her parents with the farm chores and, when she could, did small jobs for neighbors in exchange for a few pennies. Her life was simple, almost monotonous. There were no adventures, no great expectations, just the daily repetition of waking up, working and falling asleep with the same fatigue stamped on her face. Despite the seemingly peaceful routine, there was a hidden longing within her. Elena carried, like someone guarding an intimate secret, the desire to study beyond what the city school offered, to leave there and discover the world. She liked to read the few books she could borrow from the community library, dreaming of places she might never know. But the family's financial conditions were limited. Her father, weakened by an illness that left him frail, could no longer work as before. Her mother, already tired, did her best to keep the house in order. And it was up to her, almost always, to carry greater responsibilities than her age allowed. Elena was respected in the community, but also seen as someone destined to stay. Few believed that this young woman could have any future other than the field. This silent burden accompanied her in every look, in every veiled comment, in every contained sigh when seeing the buses that left the bus station carrying people far away. On that August night, when the mysterious light appeared in the field, everything seemed like a break from the predictable. At first, she thought it was a neighbor in trouble. Driven more by curiosity than fear, she walked to the point where the glow became stronger. It was then that she saw it up close. The being was lying on the grass, like someone who had fallen from a long journey. Its slender body trembled, and its movements were slow, almost painful. Beside it, the metallic object oscillated in continuous failures, as if trying to light a flame that no longer existed. Elena didn't know if she was facing danger or a plea for help. She remained standing, watching. The air seemed heavier. The stars, above her, shone with unusual intensity, like silent witnesses to that scene. The being tried to move, but the effort only increased its suffering. The dark, immense eyes met hers, conveying something beyond human comprehension. Fragility, despair, solitude. Elena, not knowing exactly why, approached. Her feet sank slightly into the wet soil of the field. She took out the only thing she carried with her, an old flashlight, whose batteries were already weak, but still emitted a faint light. She held it out in front of her, like someone offering a sign of peace. The being slowly extended its hand, or what seemed to be a hand. Its long, thin fingers touched the broken metallic object, trying again to activate it, but without success. It was at that moment that Elena made a decision that would forever change her life. She offered her flashlight. With delicacy, she placed it next to the device. The being received it carefully, as if it understood the gesture. There was a brief silence, followed by a click. The old flashlight, connected to the alien artifact, generated a stronger, firmer, almost living light. The field was illuminated for a few moments, revealing not only the creature's fragile face, but also the beginning of an improbable trust. Elena felt a shiver run through her entire body. That simple exchange, a worthless flashlight given in compassion, had established a bridge. She didn't run away. It didn't push her away. Two worlds, separated by impossible distances, met on that silent night. The being seemed to relax, as if that small gesture had renewed its strength. Elena, in turn, did not rationally understand what she had done, but she felt that something inside her had opened up. Fear gave way to a strange serenity. At that moment, the ordinary life that so imprisoned her began to fall apart. She was no longer just the young woman from a forgotten city. She was facing a secret that could never be easily explained, but which was already beginning to engrave deep marks on her soul. The first contact had happened. The following days felt strangely drawn out for Elena. During the day, her life followed the same habitual rhythm, taking care of her sick father, helping her mother with household chores, listening to the empty comments of the neighbors. But at night, when silence covered the city, she felt the irresistible call to return to the field. It wasn't just curiosity, it was a necessity. Something in her had transformed since that first night. Elena began to walk more frequently to the place where she had seen the being. With each visit, she found it trying to repair the broken device, now constantly illuminated by the light of her old flashlight. There was a strange partnership there, a silent effort by two beings from different worlds to keep a flame lit. In the beginning, communication seemed impossible. There were no words that could cross the barrier of languages, worlds, and such distinct natures. But little by little signs emerged. The being made drawings in the dirt with its long fingers, scribbles that turned into symbols, maps, and lines that Elena tried to interpret. She responded with simple gestures, pointing to the sky, to the stars, to herself. The silence, previously impassable, began to be filled with a language of the soul. On one of the nights, the being drew a series of concentric circles and then traced lines connecting them to other distant points. Elena understood. They were celestial maps, representations of worlds her eyes had never seen. With each stroke, she felt the weight of the revelation. There were other places, other lives, far beyond her small, forgotten town. On another occasion, the being extended its hand over the ground and made a brief and unstable projection appear through its device. Fleeting images of stunning landscapes, seas of colors that did not exist on Earth, mountains that shone like crystals. horizons that seemed to be made of liquid light. Elena remained stunned, her eyes welling up. She didn't know if she was crying from amazement or from the sudden awareness of the smallness of her own life in the face of that vastness. But it wasn't just the being who shared. Elena, even without perfect words, opened her heart. She spoke, in a low voice, about her father's illness, about the nights when she heard his suffocating cough and could do nothing. She revealed how much she felt the weight of being young and already carrying adult responsibilities. She confessed, almost ashamed, that she dreamed of studying, of leaving there, of being someone beyond the borders of the city. The being listened to her with surprising attention. Its fixed eyes transmitted a real presence, as if every word of hers was precious. Unlike the people in the city, who often ignored her or treated her as someone without a future, that creature from another world seemed to see something in her that no one else saw. As the nights passed, the relationship grew in depth. Elena stopped feeling fear. There was affection in the way she looked at that being, as if it were an improbable friend, a confidant. And in return, she received not only images or symbols, but an understanding that seemed to touch her spirit. A special moment was etched in her memory. She told about the flashlight she had lent. She said it belonged to her father, that it no longer worked properly, but that she kept it because she liked the feeling of carrying light in the dark. The being, as if understanding more than she was saying, held the alien device and the flashlight together, making them merge for an instant. The light that emerged was intense, firm, almost eternal. Elena understood. That small object, previously fragile, now carried something bigger. It was a symbol of the connection itself between them. More than images and visions, the being transmitted to her an idea that deeply marked her. Energy never dies, it only transforms. It did not speak with words, but the thought imposed itself clearly in her mind, like an internal whisper. For Elena, that was revelation and consolation. It was as if it said, "Nothing you lost was truly lost. Everything transforms, even you." It was at this point that Elena realized that she was not just helping an injured creature. She herself was being transformed. For the first time in her life, someone, or something, really listened to her. For the first time, her voice had weight in the universe. The field, previously just a setting for loneliness, now became a sacred space. Every night, an altar of confidences, symbols, and lights. Every encounter, one more stone on the invisible path that led her beyond everything she knew. Before we continue, if this story is already awakening something in you, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share in the comments. Do you believe that encounters like this have already happened for real? Your participation is fundamental for this message to reach more people. Elena's nights began to be different. She no longer went to bed early, as before. Her mother found the sudden habit of going out after dinner strange, but did not ask direct questions. She just watched in silence, carrying in her eyes the concern of someone who feared for her daughter in a world full of invisible risks. It didn't take long for others to notice. A small town is made up of watchful eyes, and any gesture out of routine becomes a topic of conversation. The neighbor, Mr. Ramiro, was the first to notice. From the porch, he saw Elena cross the road one night, always heading towards the field. He casually commented at the grocery store the next day, "That girl is going out too late, always alone, always on the same path." The comment fell like a seed on fertile ground. In a few hours, it spread through the narrow streets. Some insinuated that Elena was meeting someone in secret. Others said she had lost her mind, that she spent the nights talking to herself. The collective imagination, fueled by distrust, began to gain strength. For Elena, the pressure was invisible, but real. When she entered the bakery, she noticed prolonged glances, muffled whispers. Passing through the square, she felt the conversation cease until she walked away. And at home, her mother finally broke the silence. "Daughter, what do you do so much in the field? I don't want you getting into trouble." Elena hesitated. How could she explain? How could she tell that she had found something, someone, that did not belong to Earth? No one would believe her. She would be called crazy, a liar, or worse. So she answered with evasions. "I just like to think alone, Mom. It's calm there. I can breathe there." The justification sufficed for the moment, but it did not erase the shadow of doubt. Meanwhile, the being also seemed to perceive the growing weight of the situation. Its eyes expressed more caution, and its movements were less expansive. Sometimes, it interrupted the drawings on the ground when it heard a distant sound. as if it feared being discovered. Elena understood this fear because she felt it too. Every night, the risk of being followed or observed increased. The rumors began to take on darker contours. A group of men in the tavern suggested that perhaps Elena was involved in something dangerous, espionage or obscure rituals. Others, more superstitious, murmured that she had made a pact with strange forces. Human imagination, when fueled by the unknown, rarely chooses the path of compassion. Elena began to live divided between two worlds. On one side, the deep bond that flourished in the field, with revelations that gave meaning to her existence. On the other, the relentless judgment of a community that could not bear what it could not understand. One night, upon arriving at the location, she found the being restless. Its movements were abrupt, as if trying to warn her. Its eyes, usually calm, were agitated. Elena felt her heart race. Maybe it had noticed someone approaching. Maybe their time was running out. She knelt beside it and whispered, "They are starting to talk about me. They are suspicious. I don't know what's going to happen." The being did not respond with words, but placed its hand on the ground, emitting a soft glow that illuminated Eleanor's face. It was as if it said, "Courage. The bond does not depend on what they say. It depends on who you are." The unspoken words comforted her, but did not eliminate the fear, because she knew rumors, when they grow, can turn into storms. The following night, the tension was confirmed. As she walked back home, Eleanor noticed footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw two figures in the gloom. They were not immediately threatening, but they watched her in silence, with eyes seeking answers. She pretended to be natural, quickened her pace, and entered the house without looking back. But the message was clear. She was no longer alone in her secrets. The field, once a refuge, was beginning to become an arena of danger. With each visit, Eleanor had to decide if it was worth the risk. The being seemed to understand her hesitation, and their encounters became faster, more discreet. Still, neither of them had the courage to break the link. It was as if both knew that they were facing something greater than themselves, but they also knew the eyes of the world, or at least the city, were turning towards them. And, in the face of the unknown, human fear rarely chooses the path of acceptance. The nights that followed were filled with tension. The field, once a secret sanctuary, now seemed a place guarded by invisible eyes. Eleanor walked there with cautious steps, always fearing seeing a shadow that wasn't its own. And yet, at every twilight she returned. The bond was already part of her. Denying that encounter would be like tearing a piece of her own soul. The being, in turn, seemed to be changing. If before it showed fragility, now it showed signs of recovery. Its body, once battered, seemed to regain vitality. But there was something in its gaze that revealed urgency. It no longer drew lengthy symbols on the ground, nor created long projections. Its gestures became more objective, as if time was running out. One night, Eleanor noticed a change in the sky. In the distance, a luminous point moved with constancy, like a star that had decided to walk. It was different from any plane she knew. The being raised its eyes in that direction and, for the first time, an expression of relief shone on its face. Eleanor understood. Its time to leave was near. Her heart ached. She wasn't prepared. The field, the flashlight, the symbols, all of that had become part of her existence. The idea of losing her improbable friend was like losing hope itself. On the final night, the field seemed to breathe in silence. The wind had ceased, and the air was heavy, as if even nature was waiting. Elena walked to the same spot as always, but found the being in a different posture. Upright, firm, like someone preparing for an inevitable goodbye. The device beside it no longer trembled. It emitted a stable pulse, as if ready to be reactivated. Elena stopped a few meters away, not knowing how to react. Tears began to well up before she even said anything. She approached slowly and murmured, "You are leaving, aren't you?" The being did not respond with words. Instead, it picked up the flashlight, the same one she had given days earlier. But now it was no longer the same. The object, once worn and fragile, shone with an impossible intensity. The light that emanated was pure, continuous, as if it had been touched by the infinite itself. It extended the flashlight to Eleanor. Its enormous eyes reflected that clarity without ever being overshadowed. With delicacy, it placed the object in her hands. The gesture did not need translation. It was a return, but also a mission. In Elena's mind, like a deep whisper that did not come from the world, clear words formed. You illuminated my path. Now illuminate yours, and that of others. Elena sobbed, tightness in her chest, tears running freely. I don't know if I can, she murmured, clutching the flashlight against her chest. The being tilted its head slightly, in a gesture of silent trust. The message was evident. It wasn't about ability, but about courage. At that moment, the sky tore open in silence. The distant light approached, growing until it became immense. It was as if an invisible veil had been removed, revealing something that had always been beyond human eyes. The atmosphere vibrated, but without a bang. There was no explosion, just a cosmic presence that commanded respect and reverence. The being turned its gaze to Eleanor one last time. There was no fear. There was no pain. Just recognition, the certainty that that encounter would never be forgotten. It took a few steps back, towards the beam of light that now bathed the field. Its body began to dissolve in the brightness, as if it had been part of it all along. Elena tried to move forward, wanted to hold its hand, but her feet were paralyzed by the weight of the farewell. She could only scream between sobs, "Thank you. Thank you for everything." The being disappeared, absorbed by the light. The field returned to darkness in a few seconds, as if nothing had happened. The silence was absolute, cutting, almost unbearable. Elena fell to her knees, clutching the shining flashlight against her chest. She cried as she had never cried before, not only for the farewell, but for the certainty that she had been touched by something much greater than any explanation. When she finally got up, the field was empty. The wind began to blow again, the crickets resumed their melody, and the night seemed, to anyone else, just another one. But for Eleanor, nothing would ever be the same. She looked at the flashlight in her hands. The light remained on, firm, eternal. It was the silent proof that that encounter was not imagination. And more than that, it was a symbol of a promise, that her life would not be lost in a dull routine. Now she had the mission to illuminate herself and those around her. The farewell had happened. The field had returned to being just a field, but within her, something new had been born, and it could never be extinguished. The years passed like turned pages of a silent book. Life continued in her city. The neighbors went about their business, and the rumors that once threatened Elena eventually faded into the dust of time. But inside her, nothing had faded. The encounter in the field, the light of the transformed flashlight, and above all, the farewell laden with meaning, continued to live, pulsating like an eternal flame. It was 2005 when Elena, now an adult, decided to write in her diary what she had never had the courage to share openly. Sitting by the window, as the rain beat against the glass, she revisited every detail of that August night. The words flowed onto the paper as if they were not hers, but dictated by an inner voice that had long waited to be heard. She described the dirt road, the silence broken by the crickets, the figure of the injured being, the instant she handed over her old flashlight. She wrote about the celestial maps drawn on the ground, about the visions of other worlds, about the unspoken words that changed her understanding of what it is to live. And above all, she recounted the moment of farewell, the handing over of the transformed flashlight, now shining without ever going out. Elena knew that. To anyone who read it, it would seem like delusion, invention, or metaphor, but for her, it was a living memory. There was no material proof other than the flashlight, which continued to burn every day, defying any explanation. How many times had her mother seen it on the table, emitting light even without batteries? How many times had neighbors noticed it in her house, without ever questioning it deeply? The flashlight had become part of her daily life, but for Eleanor, it was more than an object. It was a witness. Over the years, Eleanor found strength in that secret. Instead of living trapped in fear of judgment, she began to use it as a source of inspiration. She became an active voice among the young people of the city, encouraging them to study, to dream, to believe that there was more beyond the limits of the hills and dusty roads. When someone said, "It's impossible," she smiled and replied firmly, "The impossible is only impossible until someone proves otherwise." She never directly mentioned the being or the night in the field. She knew it wasn't necessary. What mattered was not to convince anyone of the veracity of her experience, but to convey what she had learned, that life is greater than the eyes can see, and that each person carries within themselves the ability to transform their own destiny. Some noticed the change. "Elena looks different," they said. "More confident, more full of purpose, even in the face of difficulties." Because her father had passed away years later, and her family still faced financial limitations, Elena maintained a gaze that seemed to surpass immediate pain, as if she had seen something that gave her a perspective beyond suffering. In her notes, Elena reflected on the phrase that had been transmitted to her in such a mysterious way. "Energy never dies. It only transforms." These words sustained her through nights of grief, moments of discouragement, days when the world seemed to weigh on her shoulders. Every time she looked at the shining flashlight, she remembered that nothing is lost. Everything is remade. To others, she became an example. Young people began to look for her seeking advice. Some said they wanted to leave the city and study at distant universities. Others just sought someone who believed in them. And almost naturally, Elena became that person, the one who lights up where others only see darkness. There were no grandiose speeches or official titles, just an ordinary woman with an unusual story etched in her soul, who used her life to illuminate others. The improbable encounter in the field gave Elena more than memories. It gave her a mission, not the mission to prove anything to anyone, but to keep the flame of the impossible alive, to remind people that the extraordinary can hide in the most unlikely places, and that a single decision of compassion, like offering a flashlight, is enough to change entire destinies. And so, even without ever fully revealing her secret, Elena became a kind of silent guardian of hope. The flashlight remained on her table, shining every night, as if it were also a daily reminder. You were chosen to witness, but above all, to transform. Elena's story was not recorded in science books, nor newspaper headlines. It did not enter the annals of human history. For the world, that August night in 1997 was just another ordinary night. But for her, and for those who in some way were touched by her new vision of life, it was the mark of an irreversible transformation. The most impressive thing was not the presence of a ship in the sky, nor the symbols scratched on the ground, nor even the flashlight transformed into an object of infinite light. The most impressive thing was what all of this generated within her. The certainty that the extraordinary can arise in the most unlikely places, that even the simplest heart can be chosen to guard secrets greater than human understanding itself. Elena learned that greatness is not reserved for empires, governments, or powerful institutions. Often, the true change in the world begins in silence, in the darkness of a field, with a gesture of compassion between two souls that meet against all odds. When she looked at the flashlight shining on her table, Elena wondered, what if I had run away that night? Fear would have been natural, and no one would blame her. But instead, she decided to stay. She decided to offer something small, apparently worthless, and that was exactly what opened the door to the impossible. This is the essence of life. Great transformations rarely begin in palaces or crowds. They are born from simple decisions, from acts of silent courage, from a choice that seems insignificant at the moment, but that echoes through time. And you? What would you do if one day you found a light blinking in the middle of the night, calling for you? Would you run away? Would you ignore it? Or would you allow yourself to believe that the universe can, yes, choose the most unlikely hearts to reveal its secrets? Perhaps you will never see a being from another world. Perhaps you will never hold in your hands an object that defies known laws. But even so, each of us is placed before mysterious lights, situations, people, opportunities that ask for a gesture of faith, surrender, courage. And in those moments, the future can be changed forever. Elena's story does not end in 1997, nor in 2005, nor on any page of her diary. It continues every time someone, inspired by her attitude, chooses to believe in the impossible. It continues with every young person who dares to dream despite limitations. It continues with every person who decides to illuminate the path of another, even when their own light seems weak. And so, the legacy of that night lives on. Not in the proofs, not in the concrete evidence, but in the invisible transformation that carries within itself the power to shape destinies. Remember, what truly matters is not whether the world will believe your story or not, but what you will do with what you saw, felt, and learned. Elena didn't need to convince anyone. She just lived the truth she received. and in doing so, became a beacon for those around her. Perhaps the extraordinary is closer than we think. Perhaps right now there are silent fields, lights blinking in the distance, waiting for someone who has the courage to approach. And when that moment comes, the question will be simple, but definitive. Will you have the courage to believe? If this story spoke to you, subscribe now, leave your comment saying, "I believe," and share this video. Let's spread this light so that more people reflect on what can really happen when the impossible becomes reality.